Hi everyone, welcome to Module 1 of Mantra Sacred Body Activation. We are talking about the sacred body, orientation to what is this thing that we're working with, this organism, this body. Why is it special? Why shouldn't I just try to get through this process as quickly as possible and get on to my spirit's evolution? How is my body helpful? I thought it was a problem. Essentially, how do I relate better to myself? When we have a relationship with the body that views it as something useful, as something generous, as something innately intelligent, our entire experience of being in a body and therefore on the planet Earth transforms. There's a really beautiful teaching from Clarissa Pecola. She calls the body the companion, and she's pulling that from other traditions, but just a nice way to think about our flesh as a companion for our spirit. Now, it's different, although similar, from the tantric view of the body, which is that our soul, remember that tiny drop of the ocean, longs to know something very specific. That is our why for incarnation, for being in this body, for being on the planet right now, born to those parents in that city with these physical proclivities and tendencies. Your body is an expression initially, right at birth. Our body is an expression of our soul's longing to know itself completely. And how do we come to know anything? It's often through challenge, through obstacle. Your physical body is the obstacle. You have to feed it. You have to sleep. It wants to be touched. There's curiosity, there's pleasure, there's pain, there's aversion. So the physical body in the system of Tantra is viewed as the ultimate teacher. It is the thing to be embraced and revered and studied and maintained in order for our soul to develop to the fullest and consider all of the things that our consciousness must come to terms with during the span of a lifetime. We go from this unbelievable experience of initiating consciousness in utero and having the experience of, at least for a time, holding, and then emerging into sensory overload and learning how to work with our senses and input and stimulation and interaction and survival. And early childhood is the time when we experience even more obstacles. Learning to walk, learning to feed ourselves, going to the bathroom on our own, learning what is right and what is wrong. And here's where a lot of our conditioning happens. When I say conditioning, I mean conditioning of the mind, but also conditioning of our cells, conditioning of our body, conditioning of our behavior. And so that vehicle, the body, that was chosen by your soul to experience and express and receive and give and create, to some degree for every single one of us, has been inhibited. And the practice of yoga, the techniques handed down through yoga and its sister science, Ayurveda, view the body as this magnificent vehicle for awakening and realization. And so we are taught how to stretch and expand and stabilize and breathe in different ways that get our energy moving in different ways. And we become more and more aware of our subtle aspects. Now in Tantra, this is really important for those of you who are hardcore yoga practitioners out there. Hatha yoga is not in and of itself tantric. There is Sankhya philosophy, there is yoga philosophy, the Yoga Sutras. They're not inherently tantric texts. Tantra developed after Sankhya philosophy and yoga as a worldview that really praises the body, reveres the body, and the experience of life lived on earth right now as the spiritual path. So there's a little bit less of a feeling of austerity and much more reverence, which is why our next module we'll get to is bhakti, or devotion. For now, let's just stay with this orientation to the view of the body as a gross expression of subtle energies. Now, that being said, we're going to talk about the chakra system a little bit. Chakras are likely a familiar concept to most of you. I want to invite you to consider that the chakras are so subtle that none of us is ever directly acting upon the chakras, nor is there anyone out there that's directly acting upon your chakras, because there are so few people who truly have access to that subtle energy. And this is just a precaution that has been instilled in me by my teachers that I take very seriously. So if you are a Reiki practitioner, if you have had chakra clearings, I'm not knocking any of that, but I just invite a level of discernment when we do this work. It's not my attempt here to clear or properly balance anybody's chakras, but to assist you in cultivating a deeper sense of subtlety in your own body and more sensitivity to how those subtle energies are playing out in the real world. And I also encourage all of us to be a little more participatory in our healing. And I'll leave it at that. The chakras correlate, most of the chakras correlate to the 5 elements. So within the microcosm that is the human body, we are microcosms of the universe, the cosmos. We have all the same ingredients: earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then consciousness. These elements relate a little bit more to the feminine. The feminine is the material, the stuff of consciousness, the way consciousness divided to then know itself. Okay? Once these elements are experienced at the subtle level and aligned through our daily food choices, lifestyle choices, breath and energy practices, relationships, that is what allows us to become more fully conscious. So in our root, the root of the body, think about, if you're not familiar with this, I'll explain it a little bit. The root of the body in some way is our feet, but really for the energetic structure of the spine, the central channel of the being, which correlates to the spine. The root of that is the perineum, this dense, very, very, very thick bundle of nerves, as well as just flesh. It is the densest part of our physical structure. A lot of muscle, a lot of nerves, also this most primal expression of our humanity, which is birth, defecation, sex. This is the root chakra. This is how the root chakra expresses at a physical level. It is stability and structure, just like a root system in a plant. It is here that we start to extract what we need as an organism in order to grow and expand and become more conscious. I'm breezing through these things. We could spend, 5 modules on each element, but we're not going to. So come along with me, and there is some text in your course page that will flesh this out a bit more. The next element is water, and water rules over the reproductive organs. This is the sacral chakra, so the bundle of nerves at the sacrum, which extend through our sexual organs all the way down to the legs. Water is ruled by polarity. So what's really interesting is the water element as an energetic component of our structure exists in the pelvis, where there is this potential and need for kind of constant back and forth motion. In order to get anywhere, we take one step forward, and we're alternating forward and back like this. And this expresses the push and pull of our life. The water element has a lot to do with our nourishment, our capacity to get from one place developmentally, relationally, to another. And another element of water that's really important to understand is without water, we are inert. So while water can be stagnant, it moves if given just a little bit of encouragement. So this is an expression of the human moving from kind of an inert state of being, which is gotta eat, gotta sleep, gotta stay away from the predators, to, I'd really like to try that. Instead of just eating for fuel, I think I'd like to have this thing that tastes really good. Instead of just, avoiding the lions and not dying, I think I would like to learn to play an instrument. So water and the sacral chakra and kind of the pelvic region of the body really epitomizes our capacity and need for pleasure. I could spend all day talking about this. First things first, root structure. Without structure, water doesn't really flow. It just sort of spills and can stagnate. So pleasure without structure, curiosity without focus, we kind of spill out and go everywhere. Next is the fire element, or the solar plexus. Fire relates to our capacity to metabolize, also to become aware, to see. The sun is just a big ball of fire. It illuminates the earth so that we can see where we're going, what is happening, what is behind that tree. It clarifies. And so the fire element, as part of me as a human being, is my capacity to take in information and make it useful, take in food and make it useful. It's a necessary part of our growth. After fire is air. Air rules the cardiovascular system, the pump of the heart, the pump of the diaphragm, this steady movement. The quintessential characteristic of air is that it moves. We're not aware of air unless it's moving. And even though around us it may seem or even feel like air is still, how are we relating to it? It necessitates movement. Air is a much more subtle element than the previous three. So this is also a big part of what we're going to be exploring through our mantra practice, because air precedes vocalization, right? We can't make sound if we can't breathe. If there hasn't been some movement and expansion, there cannot be kind of the press forward or that give and take experience of taking in and then offering back, just like a conversation. With air, it's important to understand that it corresponds to our sense of touch. So our experience of breathing is our experience of being alive. When we get to the point where we're not just sort of fixated on, where's my next meal going to come from? Do I have enough money for rent? We can move into a subtler experience of our aliveness. And this is also part of our progression. But first, structure, stability. This sets the foundation for our work, your work. Have some consistency. It doesn't have to look like anything other than what is stable and consistent for you. So there is some work to be done here around self-trust and establishing structure that allows for movement and curiosity and clarification and ease, and not just austerities. You have to do it now. It has to be like this, which is the constriction that most of us have experienced, which is the constriction that makes it difficult for most of us to speak and ask for and set boundaries. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I get so excited. We're moving finally to ether, which rules the throat. Ether is space. Ether is the container in which all of the other elements exist. It's the most subtle. It's the space between every bone, every cell, every sound. Ether is the space of transmission. So in this context of vocalization practice, even conversation, remember, ether rules communication. So it's the space that allows for communication to happen, not just between two people, not just between me and my microphone, between every cell in my body, every fiber of my being, every experience I have and what I then make of it. Ether is the space that allows for consciousness to emerge. And now for those of you who are really connecting to the chakra component of this, the third eye doesn't necessarily correlate to an element, but it is more a progression, the natural progression of getting these components of ourself refined and lined up. Remember, I said they exist along this energetic structure that we equate to the spine. Suddenly, there's a feeling of eyes open and clarity, and I can see more deeply. The third eye is that eye that penetrates what is just visible to the naked eye. The gross eye, the structural eye, it goes a little bit deeper. What is behind all of this? What is the motivation? And then that leads to our, full-blown chakra explosion at the crown of the head. This ever unfolding lotus of conscious awareness and spiritual transcendence. Now, that gets a little bit away from us. It's very, very sexy. I think it's very, very sexy, and I think can lead us easily away from the point, which is you are in a body, and we're here to figure out how to live in right relationship to this body. Beyond that, I then have to figure out how to live in right relationship between my body and your body and all these bodies and the collective human body and our earth planet body and this cosmic body of being that's holding all of us. So let's come back to the root, shall we? Let's come back to a really foundational experience of being in a body and using vibration to give us a deeper experience of embodiment. And you'll find that in the next video.